For this experiment, we are using a laser diode and a collimating lens to create a collimated coherent wave. This wave is a plane wave that, as Huygens' principle describes, is made up of a plane of infinite spherical emitters shown here. When this plane is restricted by the physical bounds of the aperture, the plane wave propagates through the aperture, but the physical bounds of the aperture cause the spherical emitters at the edge to radiate, or to emit radially rather, and this causes the interference. The diffraction patterns that are seen on the imaging plane are points of constructive and destructive interference, which will be points of light and dark respectively. In this experiment, we compared an actual triangular aperture measured to have side lengths of about 470 microns to a simulation of the diffraction pattern of a triangular aperture of the same dimensions using Dr. Milster's OPTISCAN program, which is an angular spectrum propagation code. This was done for the propagation distances between 0.5 and 3 centimeters in intervals of 0.5 centimeters. Then we compared the diffraction patterns of a triangle inscribed in a circle and the diffraction pattern of a circular aperture at different Fresnel numbers.
Spectrum analyzer for our laser diode source, it was found that our wavelength was about 655.8 nanometers. In the ocean optics spectrometer, we analyzed the maximum wavelength or the peak intensity for the LD, and we found it to be about 650 nanometers, around the same value that we got for the optical spectrum analyzer.
Using a different optical spectrum analyzer and plotting the data using MATLAB, we again found that the wavelength of our laser diode source was around 656 nanometers. To get the experimental diffraction patterns, we used the diffraction bench setup with our measured triangular aperture and set the camera to view the diffraction patterns at propagation distances of 0.5 centimeters to 3 centimeters in steps of 0.5 centimeters. Comparing our experimental diffraction pattern to the simulated diffraction pattern, we can see that they match up decently at 0.5 centimeters, but as the propagation distance increases, they begin to differ. The sources of error for this could have come from either the measurement of the aperture size or the measurement of the propagation distances in lab. When measuring the size of the aperture, a microscope was used to measure the side length, but the side being measured may not have been completely flat, meaning the measurement taken may have been smaller than the actual aperture. When measuring the propagation distance, the starting position may not have been exactly at focus, meaning all of the following propagation distances may have also been slightly off. Additionally, the propagation distances themselves may have been off as they were measured by hand using calipers. The more probable source of error is the propagation distance, as the aperture size had less of an impact on the diffraction pattern than the propagation distance. Comparing the images of the simulated diffraction patterns for the circular and inscribed triangular apertures to the Fresnel atlas shows that the simulation creates an accurate depiction of diffraction patterns. As can be seen, circular apertures produce diffraction patterns where Fresnel numbers can be easily seen, while other shapes, in this case triangular apertures, do not produce distinct patterns at Fresnel numbers.